popular music. We had a library of about 700 numbers.
And they played the national anthem of every country represented at the fair.
It was very demanding physically. Some of the folks that started with us didn't make past a week. They just weren't up to it.
Little did they know the FBI considered them to be great shields for the dignitaries they paraded around the grounds.
We didn't realize all that time that we made such good shields, but that was just another talent that we had developed, I guess. But we got a big kick out of that.
Standing in front of the RCA building. At that time, RCA worked for the Computer Systems Division. We were doing student-assisted instruction, which means we were giving students computer terminals and letting them work with a computer. That was kind of new at the time. Nobody else was doing it. IBM was down the street. They were doing looms. They were making rugs with a computer and also talking to a pavilion they had over close to the Lone Star Pavilion on the other side of the fair.
The IBM Pavilion was where I got my interest and hands-on, my first experiences with computers and with video. That really has influenced my life.
Burroughs was here, NCR, UNIVAC. Everybody that was in the computer industry was here at the fair.
I also remember being at the telephone pavilion, and they had what they called at the time video telephones.
And I got to talk to another kid in Canada, and it was just thrilling to take a part of this technology.
And at that time, the video that explained it claimed that by the 90s, we would all have video telephones. Well, not quite yet.
The Ford Pavilion was really neat because they had car parts that had music coming out of them, and they had different parts that were made into instruments. And it was really fun.
We came to HemisFair a whole lot because we had a lot of relatives and friends from all over that came to see it, and we were proud to get to show it. And so on one of my trips I saw something about campfire days, and I thought, well, if they can have campfire girls, we should be able to have Baptist Girls Auxiliary Day too.
It took speedy action, but approximately 1,400 girls came from around the world.
I think we celebrated over 130 national days.
The world was much smaller then. I mean, it was not the global village it is today. So there was more individual differences you really had to address. Customs, and it was very important that you didn't tread on somebody's very perceived way of things should be done.
When somebody would come in my home, I'd give them the great abrazo. Well, I didn't know you didn't do that with Japanese. I gave this guy this great abrazo, and I think he went home to take a bath.
I remember particularly when the King of Norway came. This was, of course, for the Norway's Day. And he was outfitted in a tweed jacket that one could wear in Lapland.
It was Fiesta Week, and someone thought it would be a good idea to have our King Antonio meet King Olaf of Norway.
His English was absolutely perfect. And here came our King of Fiesta in his royal blue outfit, be-medaled, I mean really be-medaled, and be-plumed with his high hat and so forth and so on, shaking hands with King Olaf. And they were introduced, this is our King of Fiesta. And King Olaf, you could see his startled look on his face. What do you mean, a king, you know? Until we explained it to him. It was really a hilarious moment.
The Alamo Heights Choir was on hand for many celebrations. They sang the national anthem of every country at the fair.
The Chinese anthem was the hardest to learn because we had to learn it phonetically. And it was very important that we learned it precisely, or we would be saying something very different than what we intended.
And HemisFair was right on the cutting edge of talking about the confluence of civilizations. We begin to look at diversity. We begin to see, hey, maybe there's strength in diversity. Maybe it's not so important to have everything conform to one idea.
And the great variety of foreign pavilions played a key role in fulfilling the fair's theme, confluence of civilizations in the Americas. The Korean War was still in our memories, but the Korean pavilion was very well received.
The Mexican pavilion was just wonderful.
With its onyx floors and the big giant heads and the sculpture and the art it brought was just incredible.
I remember the giant Olmec head. That was really exciting to me. I seem to remember it being bigger, but I guess I was smaller then.
And Island Stage was an unusual feature of the Mexican pavilion.
About 4 times a day, you could see some of the best artists from Mexico performing there.
Then the Mexicans decided also to bring a restaurant, and it was a fabulous restaurant, by the way. You could have everything there. It was expensive as you don't know what.
They had a lot of glass. I mean, so you could watch all the action going by on the walkways and all. But the first time I ever ate there, and this full mariachi band came out, and when they started playing full tilt and the glass started shaking, I thought, this is it. I've really gotten into it now.
One of our favorite venues for taking the VIPs was the Spanish Pavilion, because there were just one troupe after another of the professional flamenco dancers from Spain coming in. And also it was nice and cool in there.
Marianne Noonan Guerra was practically a full-time volunteer at the Spanish Pavilion.
We planned and had all of the parties that were sponsored by the Spanish, and it was wonderful because they had all the color and music and excitement and the spirit that you see not only in the Spanish but in the Mexicans. I mean, there was a wonderful excitement about the Spanish Pavilion, as there was the Mexican Pavilion. The estudiantinas came from the universities, and they wore these cloaks with the ribbons all on them. And they sing, they entertain. The ambassador gave a party for the estudiantinas, and the girls from Mexico, and I wish you could have seen them dance. Even the Marquesa got out there with everybody. You can't imagine until you see all of these twirling students with their ribbons and the girls from Mexico with their beautiful gowns. It was wonderful, and I don't think anyone thought of, oh, those awful Spaniards, they Cortez this and Cortez. Wasn't that at all. It was a glorious celebration, really.
Mrs. Guerra found herself involved in all sorts of hosting situations. The French ambassador arrived for the celebration at the French Pavilion, but his baggage didn't, so she was enlisted to find a tuxedo. However, the hotel misplaced it.
He called me at home. He said, Marianne, this is Charles. Where are my clothes? He said, I don't have any clothes to put on. I said, oh, Lord, leave your phone open. And that was when I got on the phone to the manager of the Hilton, who was, I think I really did terrify him, because they started sending the men around to rooms, and of course they were right there, and Charles got there on time.
Young James Reevely chauffeured Mayor McAllister for all the special functions.
I remember particularly the French Pavilion when they had their opening. It was champagne and caviar and lots of red sashes, and it was a big deal. And here I was, this basically still kid from the south side of San Antonio, and I'm walking around, and he was not the sort of person to say, you wait at the car. It was, come on inside, son, let's have a good time.
Catherine Dupuy and Charles Chambron single-handedly got Prince Rainier and Princess Grace to come, which was wonderful.
There was a flurry of excitement when we heard that the Princess Grace of Monaco was coming to visit. Everybody who had a friend within 40 miles called them up and told them, oh, guess who's coming to see us today, Princess Grace of Monaco. So we had a house full of people that day.
My position was one of following orders and seeing that things were appropriately set up for these national days. Probably my closest brush was to make sure that Princess Grace's royal bottom was on the appropriate chair on the podium. So that was as close as I got, but boy, it was a thrill being there.
Donna Whirl and her hubby got invited to a reception for this royal pair.